Finally, we're getting into this very complicated and sharp lines of Scotch. Bishop a6, knight d2, g6, knight f3, and queen b4 check. This check might seem a little bit annoying for white, but don't be scared. We have a very cool king d1. And you might think, what's cool about it? But unfortunately, we could not go queen d2 here because the pawn on c4 would be hanging. And after queen b4, bishop b4 check, we cannot win the piece, so we just lost our c4 pawn. That's why after queen b4 and king d1, we are now threatening the move queen d2 to exchange these queens and get much better endgame. I know I was talking about sharp positions, complicated lines with full of attack, but sometimes it is necessary to trade the queens and have better endgames just because it's much easier and much nicer to play for white. For example, after king d1, black has tons of choices. First and most popular is rook b8, and the idea behind it is that it kind of prevents queen d2. Queen d2 now is bad due to bishop c4, queen b4, and rook b4, and we see that this rook is defending the bishop on c4, so instead of exchanging the queens nicely, we just lost the pawn. This is not, of course, our idea. And on rook b8, we should play queen c2, but that we will look a bit later. First of all, I want to cover all the sidelines of queen b4 line. Queen b4, king d1, and let's start with quite logical bishop g7. Maybe black does not know what white wants after king d1, so he just decides that it's time to develop. But bishop g7 and queen d2, I think, is much nicer for white because, first of all, with bishop g7, black allowed white to force this exchange of queens. Now the d5 knight is hanging, so black should change the queens. And after bishop d2, knight b6 and b3, we can see that white has much nicer endgame than black. First of all, we have better structure. Second of all, the pieces are, this knight on b6 is horrible. It's just a very bad piece. Also, the bishop is not doing anything on a6, and black usually needs time to play c5 and bishop b7, so he needs to lose quite a bit of tempos. Let's see how the game continued between Fabiano Caruana and Yakovenko. In 2013, Rhodes, castle, c5. We are not allowing black to have time for regrouping. For example, instead of castle, if black played here c5, it was, of course, an option. We would just continue our play with king c2, castle, and rook d1 or rook e1, bishop d3 is also possible. Rook e1 or rook d1 here is also very nice option. And still, black needs to have some plan in mind. He cannot simply play moves and say that, yeah, I have my pieces regrouped and now they are on perfect squares, because there is still a big problem of the knight on b6. Yes, after c5 and bishop b7, black solved the problem of this a6 bishop, but the knight is still on b6, and here, for instance, bishop e3 would cause black lots of problems because he has to defend the c5 pawn. So it's not that easy for black, and let's say after b3 and castle, c5, bishop f1, rook f1, and knight d5, it might not seem that much for white, but it's really pleasant because we have clear plan. we are going for rook c1, rook c4, rook a4 regroupment. f6 was played in the game because it is time for black to give some space to his pieces. After ef6, rook f6 and rook c4, it's true that the game ended in a draw, but I think that Fabiano had here very pleasant endgame. Moves like rook e1, rook a4 would give black a lot of problem because we are pressuring on the weaknesses, and the obvious weakness is on a7. So after king d1, let's see what happens if black decides to go back with the knight on b6, b3, and now play bishop g7. Once again, we are going for queen d2. If queen d2, bishop d2, and castle, we would transpose into Fabiano Yakovenko game, and if not, and black would go back to e7, queen e7. There was a very nice game that Nepomniachtchi won against Spiedler. Here he went bishop b2, castle, king c2, c5, and h4. I like this move very much. I was always telling you that first take care of the king and develop nicely, and then think of the attack. This is exactly, maybe not exactly, half exactly that happened in this game, because king d1, king c2, and right away h4 is there. But here it's seen that black has to do something in the center. He simply cannot allow this h5, h4, h5 attack on the king side. That's why d5 was played in the game, and after ed6, queen has to take the pawn back on c6. It is a disaster if black takes with the pawn, because after rook e1, queen d7, bishop g7, king g7, and h5, white is threatening to take on g6 and queen h6. I seriously don't know how black is going to defend so many threats on the king side. That's why after ed6, queen d6 was kind of forced, and bishop g7, queen d2, knight d2, king g7 was the game of Nepomniachtchi Spiedler, as I mentioned, and I think that it is clear that white has great advantage. Look at this position for black. Pawn Iceland, c5, c7, a7, all of them are weak. The knight is again on b6. Also, bishop on a6 is not that great anymore. It can come back to b7, but you need time to do that. So I consider it very, very pleasant endgame for white, and you can see the game, how it continued. It was a very nice game, so I definitely recommend it to see. We would not go very deep into this position because there are lots of stuff to see, and this line is huge. So let's get back to king d1, and here let's cover the third very interesting option, which is quite rare, but I find it very interesting for black, also for white. Well, it is an interesting option for black, but I think we have it under control. So what is the idea of knight e7? It's kind of a tricky move. Black knows that we want to play queen d2 next, and the idea is that after queen d2 and queen b6, black no more has bad pieces. And the point is that knight on e7 is much better than on b6. I was always telling you that this knight is a big problem in this position. But here, knight on e7 comes to f5 afterwards. If we play, let's say, bishop d3, not to allow knight f5, then black would play c5 with knight c6 idea, and knight c6, knight d4, knight b4 would be very, very annoying for us. That's why knight e7 I think is very interesting choice for black, with the idea either to jump from f5 or more to play c5 and knight c6, and then black would have a really nice place for his pieces. So if you had a question when I was always saying that black's pieces are not on ideal squares, this is the example what can be kind of dream position for black, to have c5, knight c6, pressure on e5, bishop on b7, then white would be in big trouble. Here we have to hurry up and play h4. We want right away to go for something on king side. Bishop g7. Interesting choice here would be d5, because now we cannot take ed6 with check. Knight e7 also served that purpose, that we cannot take with check. We cannot take the back on d5 because our queen is hanging on e2. So we have to play a3, queen c4, d takes c4, bishop c4 is also possible, but after bishop c4, d4, and h5, yes, black won pawn on c4, but still look at these pawns. They are tripled on c-file, and all of them are weak. h5 also, rook h4, rook c4 can be an easy idea for white. Let's say if black plays knight f5 not to allow this rook h4, then we would simply take on g6 and force f takes g6, or we could wait and we could play bishop g5, bishop g7, and h6. Then black has to go back, and after g4, black is in big trouble. If not bishop g5 and bishop g7, I don't know what is the best move for here, for black. Maybe rook g8, but it looks very ugly. King c2 and all pieces in the center. It doesn't matter we're pawn down or not, because these pawns on a c-file are all very weak. So after queen c4 and dc4, if black tries to keep the pieces on the board, we would go h5 still, knight d5, bishop d2. Now we are having again some calm play. We don't pay attention that we are pawn down, and we are not desperately going to think that we have to get it back. No, we first develop and we enjoy this space, and we are ahead in development. So rook b8, king c2, bishop c5. And here it is important, very important, the next move, which kind of completely destroys black's pawn structure. And what I mean is that if we play like normal, if we defend the pawn on f2, then black would consolidate his pieces, there would be nice coordination between them, and we might find ourselves in big trouble. That's why we need this enthusiasm, motivation and energy for Scotch. Even if there are no queens on the board, we still need energy to play something like e6. Very powerful, very, very powerful move. Now, f takes e6 is bad, because we just take on g6 and this guy is hanging on h8. If, let's say castle is the best option for black. We can simply take on h7 with check or play bishop h6 first. It is very good for white. On e6, I think castle is the move, and e takes f7, rook takes f7, take on g6, and rook e1. Now take a look at black's pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weaknesses. 5 weaknesses in one position, it's too much. Yeah, the pawn is extra and we don't have winning position, but we have great chances, I think. First of all, if black is greedy and takes on f2, we are not giving this other pawn that easily, and we are going for rook e6. With rook e6, we are threatening to take on g6 and c6, so black has to do something, and the move that comes to my mind is bishop b5, but look at these pieces, it's just horrible. Bishop on b5. Is it a piece or a pawn? I don't know. Anyway, I would stop here, and I would tell you that definitely I would play this position with white, and I really hope that you would do the same because it really looks great. Okay, so after h4, let's say not d5, but bishop g7. Bishop g7, h5, castle, and queen c2. Now another option is, of course, to play queen d2 instead of queen c2, but I didn't like the move c5. Somehow queen b4, c4, king c2 and bishop b7 seems to be very easy for black. There is no more bad structure in black's position. The pieces are also on nice squares, and white does not have anything special in this position. Maybe I would even prefer to play with black pieces. So after h5 and castle, queen c2 is more in the character of Scotch. c5 still. If rook a e8, then bishop d2, queen b6, and we go for c5. Queen b7, and now queen b3. This is very much bothering for black, because queen b3, a takes b3 is definitely in our favor. After bishop f1 and rook f1, we have open a file, and this is an obvious weakness on a7. So after queen c2, black has to go c5, and now we have to get all our attention on the king side. Knight g5. We definitely want a very bad sacrifices on the king side. For example, if black would make a pass, let's say, and play something like bishop b7, then hg, hg, queen d3, and queen h3 might be very problematic for black. So after knight g5, black has, I think, two main choices. One is d5. After hg, hg, bishop d2, queen b6, and queen c3. Again, we are heading to h3. Knight f5. Here, if rook fd8, black completely ignores our threats, everything on h-file, and he is just saying that, okay, you can come queen h3, but I have always king f8 escape, so what are you going to do? But we have a very nice move, rook h7. And this move serves a lot of purposes. First of all, it might be scary that what if rook g7 sacrifice happens on the board, and then e6 comes. In this position, it's very, very easy for black to see ghosts. And after, let's say, queen c3, if black plays knight fa and knight f5, then g4 comes. Knight h6 closes this h file, but after king c2, I think that white's attack is much more dangerous than what black has in the center. So you see that this is quite complicated and sharp line, and knight e7 does give black an interesting play, but he also has to be very brave to play this move because it looks definitely very dangerous for him. If after knight g5, h6 is there, then we have brilliant lines coming on. Knight e4, if bishop e5, then bishop h6, rook fe8, take on g6, and bishop d3. I think it would give white a very direct play on the king side, because after queen b2, we have rook b1, queen c2, and king c2, and then we can simply do something on h file. I don't know what black is supposed to do here. Let's say d6 if he wants to support the c5 pawn, but then f4 would be problematic, because bishop g7, bishop g5, or even f5 would not be a help for black. After knight e4, instead of bishop e5, let's say black plays knight f5, then we have a very interesting line connected with knight f6, bishop f6, e takes f6, and rook a e8. Be careful, there is a mate on e1. Bishop d2, queen b6, h takes, f takes, and g4. If you asked me, I would say that this is winning position for white. But it would be winning if black did not have this Zwischenzug, bishop b7. And here we have a brilliant sacrifice of, can you guess which piece? Of the queen. Rook h6, this is not difficult to find, because after knight h6 there is queen g6 and mate, but after rook h6 there is bishop e4, and we don't want to move our queen and just give up this rook on h6 just like that. Of course not. Rook g6, king f7, g takes f5. Look at this sacrifice. It is only for 2 pieces, but look at the pawns on f6 and f5. This is totally brilliant. Rook g8 and bishop d3. I simply love this position with white, because I can see how powerful can be 2 bishops even if they are against the queen. And here after bishop c3, the pawns would be defended, so I think that white has great compensation for the queen. This is why I said that I find knight e7 quite interesting for black, because if you like this position with black, go ahead, you can play it. It's not lost, but it's definitely black is definitely under pressure. Though, if you believe in the queen, go for it. But I would encourage whites to go for this sacrifice, have the initiative, and just play this position. Woo! That was a big line, huh? That was a really big one. But we are heading to much bigger one after queen b4 and king d1. Move rook b8. Rook b8, I already said what was the idea, that it kind of prevents queen d2, queen c2, and knight e7. Now, what is the difference? If black went knight e7 in this position, first we had a direct h4. But now we have rook b8 and queen c2 included, knight e7, and we don't want to go for h4. This is, of course, it's an option to go for h4 and play bishop g7, h5, castle, b3, and d6, but I don't think that it is that powerful as it was in that position. Bishop d2, queen a3, bishop c1, queen b4. We have a repetition of the moves, but do we really want to repeat? I don't know. If you want it, if you're ready for it, you can for sure go for h4. But we have lots of interesting options here. One is h4, another main is b3, and another one is bishop d3, which I think is also very interesting. Bishop g7, a3, queen b6. Instead of queen b6, if black goes queen b7, then after rook e1, castle, and b4, we have a very nice plan. We want to go king e2 f1, and the bishop we can go on two sides, here and there, on b2 and on g5. And if we manage to get our king on the safe side, develop our bishop, then we would have space advantage. We would have center. And this bishop on a6 is a bad piece. The bishop on g7 is kind of closed. So I think that after b4, king e2, king f1, we already have a very clear plan, and white has pleasant position. Instead of b4, in the game of Rajab Baronian 2010, Moscow, bishop g5 was played. And rook e8, b4, d5, c5, and bishop d3. And this was, the game was ended in a draw, but I think that improvement of this game is b4, just because that if, let's say, black goes for, we're not developing our bishop yet on g5, and we have an option to go to b2 as well. d5 is an option, of course, but after, let's say, c5, bishop d3, queen d3, and say rook e8, we can go bishop to b2 or bishop to d2 or knight d4. I like knight d4 the most because then we can go f4, the knight cannot jump to f5 anymore, and it looks very nice for white. Okay, if on a3 black goes queen b6, then b4 once again. c5, not to allow any pawn advance, any more pawn advance for white. c5, bishop e3, bishop b7, black sacrifices this pawn just to get some space for the pieces. Bishop c5, bishop f3, g takes f3, and queen e6. Black sacrificed the pawn, but he got rid of the bishop on a6, and he really damaged our kingside structure. Tiny bit, just a bit. Though what's good news for us, we have an extra pawn, and black still did not castle. We can defend this pawn on e5, and we can try to support the e5 pawn as much as possible. I would prefer to play with white pieces here. I don't know if there is anybody who would play here with black pieces, because there is no extra pawn. Instead, black has gave up his pawn. a7 is weak, and there is no clear compensation. black has compensation because of our king in the center. But if we manage to consolidate everything and have our king on the safe side, then we will just enjoy an extra pawn. So bishop d3 is a valid option. But we saw that black has many choices there. Now let's take a look at the main move b3. Bishop g7, bishop d2, queen b6. Queen b6 was played in many games. Queen a3, just bishop d3, and we can always kick this queen out with bishop c1, so it's not a big deal. Queen c5, again bishop d3, castle. If not castle and black wants to take the pawn on f2, then bishop a5 would be very strong. We force the exchange of the queens, and after queen c2, king c2, black has to defend this pawn on c7, and once again black would be left with bad pieces on the board. Yeah, we don't have an extra pawn, we are pawn down, but black's position with these pieces is not ideal. We have a very strong e5 pawn. If, let's say, black wants to get knight c6 after c5 and play knight c6 next, we have a very, very strong, heat? No, we have a very strong, okay, let's just say move, which is e6. These kind of ideas you should remember, because Scotch is such opening that you cannot let your opponent to do what he wants. If there is something that you see that, yeah, after this I'm going to feel slightly worse or be slightly worse, then you should think of powerful moves, and e6 is indeed powerful, because after bishop c3, obviously the bishop on g7 was hanging, we can trade the pawns. Let's say we take on f7, king f7 and king c3. Now f-file, e-file is open. All our pieces can go to the center on e and f-file on the king side as well. And it's not very easy for black to regroup. What he can do? For example, he wants to play rook e8 to get this king like castle, yeah, king g7. Then knight e5 would be very winning for white, because king e6 should be played, the pawn on d7 cannot be dropped, and after rook a or h e1, these knight jumps would be very, very, very bad for black. If, let's say, after king f7 and king c3, black plays d6, then there would be a great hole on e6. We can simply play rook a e1, and knight g5, knight e6, rook f1 can be very annoying for black. Okay, queen f2 maybe is a bit greedy. So castle, rook e1, queen f2, bishop a5, wait, this we already covered, and rook d1. Oh no, this is, yeah, this also transposes into the lines which we saw, and this is kind of the good version what black could get. But still, here we have a nice advantage. We are pawn down, but let's say once again c5 would run into bishop e4, and knight c6 is not an option, because first of all d7 is hanging, and we can take on c6, queen b takes c6, and rook d7. This is totally, totally great for white. Okay, let's get to the main line. Bishop d2, queen b6, c5, queen b7, bishop a6, queen a6, rook e1, castle, queen c4, and queen b7. This is what was played in the game of Svidler-Hracek 2011. Here I think black should have taken the queen on c4, and after bc4 played d5. This is an obviously very complicated position. This type of breakthroughs in the center is has to be considered always. So let's say c takes d6, c takes d6, and king c2. I think that this is very double-edged endgame, but I would prefer to play it with white pieces because, first of all, we have much more space for our pieces. Yeah, our king is on c2, but now it's doing a good job because, first of all, b line and b file, the important squares b2 and b1, is supported with the king. There is no danger on our king, and after bishop c3, rook d1, I think that white has lightly better chances than black. Though in the game it was played queen c4, queen b7, rook c1, and after knight d5, I will quickly go to the game, go through the game, because it was very nice, kind of a model game, king e2 and king f1. Like we said that it is our plan to get king on the safe position. Queen b5, g3, we ignored the fact that black wants now to exchange the queens, but now we do take the queen. And after rook e4, again, same type of ideas. Rook e4, regrouping on a file, knight e1, a4, rook a4, rook a4, b takes a4, rook b2, and rook c2. White had just an extra pawn in the game, and then he converted it very nicely. I know this video is super long, and it is full of super sharp lines, but I think that we needed this time to go through all the ideas and all the lines that is important in Scotch. From the beginning, I think I didn't promise you to have a clear advantage anywhere, but this is exactly what I was looking for in Scotch, to have always playable position where black has many chances to make mistakes and get into trouble. Top players, world champions, like Vladimir Kramnik, we saw how he went wrong in the game and lost it. If they can make mistakes, of course your opponents can also make mistakes when you give them chances to. And Scotch is full of these opportunities that you're having a pressure on your opponent, you have some attacking chances on the king side, and it's very easy, believe me, it's very easy to make mistakes with the black pieces. If black makes all correct moves and chooses all correct lines, then we would get a very double-edged position, but we would never get an evaluation of dead draw. I really hope that you enjoyed this series. This was the last video on Scotch, but I would definitely I would definitely advise you to watch the next video, which would cover all the key positions you need to remember in Scotch. So I will see you in the next video, but for now I wish you very good luck, and I hope you really enjoyed the video series and you got this energy and motivation I tried to give you. So see you soon.